Well, throughout the past several years, we've seen the left whip up hysteria about book bans every time a parent criticizes pornographic books at their children's school. But this week, the House Judiciary Committee released emails detailing how the Biden administration pushed for actual book bans by pressuring Amazon to remove books that contradicted their vaccine narrative. And this week, the House Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government examined how the National Science Foundation funded the development of AI tools to enable online censorship and propaganda. Joining me now to discuss this, Congressman Matt Gaetz. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee, the House Armed Services Committee, and the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. Congressman Gaetz, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Tony. And I think a lot of your astute viewers and observers will have some familiarity with this notion of government-induced censorship, right? Where there's a person trying to cajole a tech company or a news outlet or some other platform from limiting the distribution of certain type of content, even constitutionally protected speech. But now the new revelation that we just learned this week is that they're actually replacing some of the humans who do that, occasionally or periodically with robots who can then censor at scale and can really limit the ability for normal, rational discourse to occur. And one of the things that I know will be concerning to all of us is that some of the terms that they used to search and limit content, to designate people potentially vulnerable to disinformation or extremism, if someone lived in a rural area, if someone was part of a military family, and even if somebody had reflected that their belief in the Bible or the Constitution was textual, that it was sacred, and if you had more than one of those factors, it actually stacked up to limit your access to information. So that's the big revelation, and it's deeply concerning to many of us.
I mean, there are so many problems with this. Number one is where it could lead to. This sounds kind of like China with a social credit score if you get too many marks against you. But I want to talk about the hypocrisy here, where the left is going out because parents are wanting to protect their children from harmful pornographic material that is pushing the left's indoctrination when it comes to the whole sex area of gender, transgenderism, and all of that. But here, when you have actual scientific minds, publications that are challenging the Biden administration's approach to COVID-19, that's what we're talking about here in particular as it pertains to Amazon, they're out there using Amazon as a tool to violate the First Amendment.
Yeah, the difference between the right and the left on this is that the right embraces the opportunity for knowledge and exploration and different viewpoints and comparing them to one another. And the left wants to control the very nature of truth itself. Part of how they control that nature of truth is to try to infect young minds with all of this nonsense that really has no place in adolescence or the public education system. And they're trying to shape a particular viewpoint there that deviates from the traditional family and really just traditional life in society. And at the same time, if you've got scientific data or analysis that you want to publish that talks about vaccine injuries or herd immunity, you had people literally in the White House, people at the Department of Homeland Security, people that were senior advisors to the President of the United States using the awesome power of government to try to manipulate and cajole companies like Amazon and others to really proliferating a political stance, not an exploration for knowledge.
Right. I mean, this is a new revelation of Amazon. We knew that they were leaning on the social media platforms. There's a lawsuit out of the state of Missouri and Louisiana that will be before the Supreme Court on that front. But also the use of AI to the censorship effort by the National Science Foundation. That's also new information that has come forward, showing that, I mean, this thing is like an octopus. It has arms everywhere. This is a complex operation. What did we learn at this week's Weaponization Subcommittee hearing about this, and how was this uncovered?
So there's this governmental entity called the National Science Foundation. And what that group does is they take public money taxpayer money, and then they put out grant opportunities for entities like MIT or the University of Wisconsin-Madison or the University of Michigan to come and apply. And in those applications, you saw the universities competing for the new capabilities that they could bring to a censorship regime, to the censorship industrial complex. So the slideshows would be MIT saying, don't worry, we can find that we've assessed that the people in rural areas, military families, people who are devout Christians, we know that they're real gullible and susceptible to disinformation. So we can use AI tools to specifically target those folks and to create this government enacted resilience around them, which is actually a barrier to truth and exploration and discovery, and their ability to get the money out the door. And you're so right to call it a complex system, really shows what we're up against. And so what's the answer to all of this would be a reasonable question. I think first you have to defang the authorities that even allow this type of censorship to occur in the name of disinformation scholarship. And then secondly, you have to cut off the money. This goes to the larger discussion you and I have had many times on this program, but when we fund the government with one up or down vote on everything from the veterans to the troops to the seniors to the censorship, then some of the worst things that we pay for are allowed to exist in perpetuity. I'm fighting for a system where each agency of government has to endure line item review and scrutiny. That's what allows us to really get the weeds out of our federal spending and limit the ability for these types of harmful systems to continue.
Yeah, I mean, that is a conversation in and of itself where, I mean, for 20 years, we've not done the normal appropriations where we take the 12 appropriations bills. We've done these omnibus, we've done continuing resolutions. You're saying take it even a step further, which I would totally agree with. That's the only way you ferret this out, is that you analyze and you look. I mean, we really need to go back to zero budgeting, where we make these agencies start from scratch and make their submissions, as opposed to, you know, just adding a little bit of percentage every year and just growing it to this behemoth that we currently have.
But hold on there, Tony, because there's a reason that doesn't happen. What you just said makes so much sense. Start with a blank sheet of paper and say, what are our priorities in a world that's changing so quickly? But you know whose ox that gores? The lobbyists and the special interests, because they want to live in a system where once you get a program or a funding stream available for the people paying you, you want that to never be challenged again. And so that's why we have this system. It's not a bug, it's a feature. And zero-based budgeting, like you just described, that's how a lot of our states operate, and that's how they're able to get rid of wasteful spending and balance budgets in all types of economies.
I mean, that's why we have programs that were outdated from 50 years ago still being funded. Because they just don't go away. They have a constituency. Matt, we're almost out of time. I want to ask you this question. As you described AI, you described what the Biden administration is doing to manipulate, provide disinformation, and to silence dissenting voices. That is exactly, I've been talking about this a long time, but this week in particular, the World Health Organization and their pandemic accord, what they're pushing, specifically in the accord, which is a treaty, they are saying governments need to crack down on disinformation. This is exactly what the Biden administration is doing. They would love the pandemic accord.
Not only is it the same playbook, there's some of the exact same plays. If you look at what the World Health Organization is trying to stop, it is the publication of a lot of the scholarship around these vaccine injuries and the limited efficacy in some circumstances. And so, of course, when you see our government tracing that, it ought to give cause for concern. But even more concerning is that you're eventually going to have one of these AI bots that's able to survey all of the globalist concepts, all of the worst ideas from the World Health Organization to the UN to Lord knows who, and integrate that into one censorship system that can be deployed at scale. And you're right, that sounds a lot more like China than the United States of America. I don't think we beat China by becoming more like them. I think we beat them by being the most inspirational, positive version of ourselves, freedom-loving and God-fearing.
Freedom of speech, freedom of ideas being out there. Matt, 30 seconds left. Budgeting, obviously cutting off the funding supply, but what are our steps forward now, right now, where we are to rein this in?
Yeah, I think it's all about following the money. Of course, we can bring in the bureaucrats who have approved these things, and we can humiliate them and browbeat them. But at the end of the day, if we keep sending the check, they'll keep disseminating it like this. That's why sometimes people's eyes can glaze over when we talk about the intricacies of the federal budget process. But if you really want the results, if you want to get rid of some of this stuff, that is the hard roll up your sleeves work that has to be done.
You're absolutely right. That is at the heart of the matter. The intentions, the morals drive the process, but it is actually the money that dictates which ways it goes. Matt Gaetz, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, my friend.